Get strong.
Hello and welcome. I am so excited to be talking to Rebecca today and bringing Rebecca to you because she has got an incredible story, an incredible ministry, and I think you're going to have an incredible impact just from leaning in, whether you're watching this, whether you're listening to this. I think you're going to be impacted in an amazing way. Let me just tell you just a tiny bit of everything that Rebecca is. First of all, Rebecca Binder. She is a sex trafficking survivor, founder, CEO of the Rebecca Binder Initiative, author of In Pursuit of Love, One Woman's Journey from Trafficked to Triumphant. And I'm just telling you, that is like an inch of the mile wide things of what Rebecca is doing. So Rebecca, thank you so much for being on the Crazy Blessed podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited too. So we need to talk, girl. I was just looking through all of your story, how you have been through the fire again, through the fire again, but God pulled you out of that. So could you just share a little bit, just for people who don't know you, a little bit about your story?
Yeah, I was born and raised in a small town in Southern Oregon. It's kind of a average all-American small farm town kid.
Yeah.
And my parents divorced when I was 9, created a lot of vulnerabilities in me that I didn't know was there when you grow into your teens. You're still just looking for love in all the wrong places and not realizing there's some like deep rooted, roots that have taken hold. And but nonetheless, they matter and they become a vulnerability. So I'd graduated high school a year early. I was a varsity athlete, honor roll student. Still just also a party girl. I just wanted to be a part of things. I was like, cheerlead at the football game and then jump in the back of the pickup truck and head to the bonfire with beer. I don't want to paint the pictures if I didn't also, was just a yes girl. I just wanted to be liked and I wanted to be a part of something. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of that stemmed from growing up in a broken home as an only child. I just felt really alone a lot. And so there was some roots from that. But
Mhm.
I ended up having graduating, having my dorm room assigned and getting pregnant, and ended up unenrolling from the university, staying in my farm town, attending community college, and having my daughter. And when my friends had moved out of the dorms and into an apartment, they had an extra room. And I thought, finally, the tables are going to turn for me. And so I got out of my small town so excited, and that's when some of those same vulnerabilities of loneliness started to resurface, because I'm the girl on the campus with the kid. I don't have support from my family. And that's when a young man came along and had all the answers to my problems, and just really got swept me up in this idea and vision and dreams of what our future could be, and had all this ambition that I was not used to seeing. And
Wow.
I just got enamored and fell in love. And he invited me to move in with him. And I didn't realize that he was a trafficker and I was being conned. He actually wasn't the age he said he was. He didn't have the job that he said he had. He tricked me. And I think that's part of the issue with human trafficking is we're all picturing, kidnapped kids in parking lots, white minivan offering them puppy and a candy. And what's really happening is that doesn't generally sell, right? Sex sells in America,
Right.
and so how are traffickers using fraud, which is actually part of the definition of trafficking, is the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So to use fraud to lure someone out under really false pretenses,
Mm.
pretending to be someone you're not, and then get them separated from their community and support, and then exploit them, and exploit their vulnerability and their situation. That's really what we need to start teaching parents more about is to how to teach your kids, not stranger danger, but when your boundaries are being pushed and when you're putting in situations you feel uncomfortable, how do you get out of them safely?
Right.
Those are the things we need to really, I think, instill in our kids.
Yeah, totally. So here you are, you're enamored, and what you said is like they separated you from your family, from your hometown, like, and that was all by design, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many tactics that traffickers employ, and they're really different based on the type of trafficking. I want to make sure of that. There's 25 different types of human trafficking in America alone,
Wow.
and every predator has a different tactic.
Yeah.
In my situation, it would be considered domestic pimp controlled human trafficking, what's also known as a Romeo pimp in the kind of criminal world, which is where they use a false
Right.
sense of love, hence the term Romeo.
Mm, girl.
But yeah, they separate you. They want to take you where they're going to make money. It's not necessarily, it is to isolate you. Just domestic violence, it happens, the same thing happens in domestic violence. It's a separation from your support networks.
Right.
Um, and that's intentional. And they also want to bring you, they're following money. So wherever large groups of men congregate, traffickers will follow. They're looking for you. They're Googling all day. Where's the next conference, next stockbrokers conference, next real estate conference, next Super Bowl, next anything, March Madness. Super Bowl gets a lot of press, but it's everywhere.
It's
And they'll follow the money. And that's what they're, they have a product and they're trying to find a buyer.
so here you are. You just were swept off your feet. Then you realize, wait, this guy is not who he says he is. And you started to get a little suspicious then.
I mean, I was immediately forced into human trafficking like within the day of arriving. And so it was very obvious that this was not what I thought it was going to be. And that first night, I can remember literally looking out the car window and crying and thinking, how did I get here? Like, I'm a good kid from a good home. Like, how did I get in this situation that I don't know how to navigate? And I'm afraid. I really need to get home to my daughter. I don't know where she is. And I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. I don't want to tell anybody what just happened to me or what I felt like maybe was I felt very much victim blaming. You feel like it's your choice in the middle of it. And so you're like, I'm so embarrassed of what I've done and it's my fault and I went in the room. You're not realizing, no, this guy used fraud and coercion to
Yeah.
to get you to comply out of fear. This wasn't your, but you're not thinking like that in the moment. And what else people don't realize is, and then I was also in love. I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Go back to those same vulnerabilities of being this like really lonely girl on campus when this man that I'm in love with, he told me it won't happen tomorrow. And so maybe it'll be better tomorrow. And it's not better, but it was immediate that I knew it was very different. I just didn't know it would last very long and I didn't know how to get out of it in the middle. I mean, you're 19,
Yeah.
you're a
Yeah.
single mom. You're not we're all, if we all can remember being 19, you don't make the smartest decisions anyways,
Right.
let alone you're adding on all these heightened vulnerabilities, desensitized to violence from my childhood, like all sorts of other things that make your brain think the way they do. Um, Most people ask really great questions, and my answer typically, whatever someone's thinking right now, well, why didn't you run? Well, why didn't you call home? Why didn't you ask a cop? I get all those. And my answer is that's a really healthy adult way of thinking.
Yeah.
And you should think that way as a healthy adult.
Mm.
These victims are not healthy adults. They're vulnerable teenage girls
Wow.
who've been traumatized and have been desensitized, often have really high ACEs scores, which is an adverse childhood experience. Um, 70% on average of trafficked victims come out of foster care. You're
Yeah.
talking about a deep, wounded need to love and be loved.
Yeah.
And so they're not thinking like healthy adults.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I remember there was inside Mom Master University, which is what the university we have online that helps moms and provides life coaching. There was a mom on there who her child got caught up in that. And all of a sudden it was like I wasn't able to contact her. There was like a wall, like this guy who swept her off her feet and said that he was
Mhm.
taking her to meet his family. All of a sudden she's separated and
Yep.
there's no contact. And so praise God, they were able to hit the road, track her down, and rescue her from that. But how, like, what can we do as, I mean, you're doing so many things. You're working with FBI, you're doing initiatives, you're working with all of these agencies, you're helping organizations. Sometimes I know people feel like I'm one person and I know trafficking is a horrible thing. What can I do? Like, it's one thing to be aware of it. Now, how can we take this awareness and contribute to the solution?
Yeah. I think it's such a good question, and I would tell parents and anyone listening, if there's one thing you can do, it's It's we have to figure out how to raise our kids in a very hypersexual, pornified culture. Now, this is not just a girl's issue. The number one buyer of sex in the world is American men. Why? How are we raising our sons when porn is at your fingertips by 5 years old? What happens? I know most people don't do this because we shouldn't, but when you Google pornography, most people, I would think my age and older, I'm almost 40, maybe 35 and up. When youth used to think of that phrase when you were younger, you might picture, running across a Playboy in your photo kind of in your childhood. That is a very different world we live in
Yeah.
today. And
Yeah.
when you Google that phrase, you get hardcore pornography where people are being choked until they're crying. It's a horrible, horrible industry that is so readily on your fingertips at phones and tablets and computers. And I think because it's a different generation, we're not realizing what our children have access to. Even if you think, well, my kid has filters on their devices, but their friends might not. And their
Yeah.
friends are going to stand next, they're going to go stay at their house and they're going to see them at school. They're going to see them in a variety of settings. We have to start teaching our children how to have better ability to have self-control, to have the character mass to withstand the hit. We've got to figure out a way as parents. What you can do to fight trafficking is start in your own home with your own kids, teach them about sex for sale in an age appropriate way. There's lots of different resources out there: good touch, good picture, bad picture, all sorts of ways that we can talk about this issue so that kids aren't caught off guard. And now suddenly their brain is having a neurological connection with a really extreme photo that they've just seen. And that's really hard to undo. And so what happens is it continues to spiral out of control.
Yeah. And you're right. I think so much, we can just default to the filters. We can default to like, well, I got this service set up and I'm safe in that little bubble, but that bubble is going to get broken by so many things. I mean, it's amazing. Rebecca, I know you know, and probably a lot of listeners or viewers know this, but it is so readily available. Like you cannot escape it. It is because the people who are trying to push this pornography and push the trafficking and find the victims are so crafty. That is their entire career. That's their entire pursuit is how do I reach them early? How do I reach the vulnerable? How do I get them? And that's not our full-time job. Like
Right.
to prevent us. So we've got to use the wisdom of God to stay one step ahead of
Yeah. And I mean,
professional crime.
yeah, the thing too, this is a business to
Yeah.
companies. This is a business to try to get people hooked and addicted, just like any other types of addictive
Right. Right.
things, alcohol, cigarette, anything that's addictive, substance. This is a business. And so they're looking at ways to access their clients, to reach them, to get them to come back again and again. And so this isn't a crime of passion, so to speak, or obviously there's connections in the world of human trafficking where there becomes other things, but I'm talking about the demand side. The
Yeah.
demand side is a whole way that we can fight human trafficking that people don't actually realize. And you have your mom university. We have an online e-course called Find Your Lane, and it teaches you 10 different ways that you can fight human trafficking. The one I know I'm spending the most on today is demand. For whatever reason, must be Holy Spirit, but I think because we have so many moms that have sons that they think, most people think, how do I keep my daughter safe? And I just feel like we're forgetting there's this whole equation in human trafficking where we're having to figure out how to raise up young men in an era where they should defend and protect and honor. And we can do better, and we can
We
teach
can do
them to
so
have
much
that
better.
self-control with their friends and to stand up and say, no, man, I don't want to see that. I'm not into that. I'm not going to get sucked down that rabbit trail. But if we're not having those conversations, we're actually, America is fueling the supply and the demand of sex for sale. It's out of control. If we want to fight trafficking, we got to hit demand too. We can't just keep talking about how to keep our daughters safe. We have
Mm,
to teach our young people not to buy sex.
that is so good. That is so good. Like you're right. We do hear a lot about how to protect our girls, but then how do we equip our guys?
Yeah.
How do we do that? How do we raise up warriors? How do we raise up moral giants?
Yeah.
How do we teach them? And I know that like a lot of people probably like don't like to have these conversations.
Oh, they're so hard. I've got 4 kids. I know how hard they are to have. They're so uncomfortable, and I do this for a living, and I'm like my friend the other day,
Yeah,
she was talking on her Instagram about the Good Touch, Bad Touch, book that she's
yeah.
using with her kids, and she goes, "Have you used this with your girls yet?" And I said, "No," and she was like, "Rebecca, I can't believe you." I'm like,
Like, come on, you're the
"It's so
poster child.
uncomfortable. I get it." I get it. It's hard. It's hard to find age appropriate things too, and where you know that your children's development is personally. I
Yeah.
mean, you know your kids, you know what they can handle, you know what words to use. But if we don't try to talk about it, someone will.
Oh, someone
Someone
will.
will talk
Someone
to
will
them. Their
become
12-year-old
very fluent.
friend's gonna
Yeah,
yeah.
someone will very
Yeah.
fluently explain it. And so, I mean,
Yes.
I have 7 kids, and it's so funny because, before we got on this interview, I was actually talking with my 2 youngest girls who are, 15 and 18, but we were talking about how every single one of my kids, the guys included, I was the one who had to have all those conversations because my husband was so embarrassed. I was like, dude, like somebody's got to do it. And the thing is, like, you can have that rapport. You can be embarrassed. It's like, get over it. Do it embarrassed. Do it awkward. Do it like really weird. But just have those conversations because I want my kids to know they can come to me with any situation at
Yeah.
all, and
Yeah.
there'll be zero judgment, and we're gonna work through whatever that is together, like
Yeah.
whatever that is.
And it's worth it to be uncomfortable, right? Like, I'd rather be
So
a
worth
little
it.
bit embarrassed as long as my daughter knows that she can come to me, that she can talk to me, and that her questions, if she does have questions, that not her 12-year-old friend isn't answering all her questions, and all that friend's 12-year-old wisdom.
Yes, right, right, and
And
all that vast wisdom,
yeah,
right,
I'm willing to let myself be uncomfortable so
right,
that she can be protected in some capacity. So,
absolutely.
which one do you want?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, so important. Well, I love that, you look at both sides of the coin. Let's look at the guys and the girls. Let's equip the supply and the demand and fight the battle right there.
Yeah.
And, also I wanna talk a little bit before we wrap this up. I think this is really important. Your personal redemption story, because I think a lot of people, I mean, you thought when you had been beaten, you had been branded, you had been, just you thought that was going to be your life. Really,
Mhm.
you thought that was my
Yeah.
reality. And there are a lot of people listening and watching who, they may not be in sex trafficking, but they could be in a situation that feels hopeless. They could be an
Mhm.
abusive situation. They could be in a hopeless situation. They could, whatever it is, they're looking forward and it looks very dark.
Mhm.
But God did not abandon you. He stepped in. Can you share about that? Because I think some people today, even though, they may not have kids who are at this vulnerable state, or they might, wonder what they can do, but also they might be facing a bleak future themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if God did it for me, he can do it for anyone. I was so lost. Almost 6 years of being trafficked, 3 different traffickers, my face broken in multiple places, hospitalized for dehydration and overexhaustion. I literally just collapsed in a Hard Rock hotel and casino because I hadn't been able to sleep or eat or drink in several days. Um, I've been branded twice, like you said. 2 men tattooed their names on my back to show ownership. It was a horrible, horrible life. I just wanted to die. By 21, I was a full-blown addict. I'd started using drugs to numb my pain and embarrassment and shame, and my family took my daughter from me. I lost my daughter. I just was hopeless. At that point, I started, trying to kill myself. I had 2 attempted suicides. I just really wanted to die, and I was so grateful that in the midst of my despair that God saw fit to step in. I love Psalms 41 where it says, from the clutches of Satan, put your feet on solid rock and steadied you as you walked along. And I just love that verse because it reminds me of the moment that he plucked me out of the clutches of Satan and steadied my feet as I walked along. It wasn't an easy journey. It was really hard. I think people, they want to see this bibbity bobbity boo moment where like the fairy godmother of Jesus comes in and makes it just
Right.
so not how it works in real life. Uh,
Right.
I mean, putting in a lot of effort to heal, it takes work. It takes actual literal work for you to try to build yourself back up. But it was the grace of God that stepped in and opened doors and got me to a safe spot. And
And
um,
that was during a raid, wasn't it?
I actually got saved in the middle of my trafficking at a church. I went to the altar. I was in rehab, and I went to the altar, and I got radically delivered from drug addiction at an
Praise
altar. I
God.
had
Praise God.
no clue that even happened. Like, it was so bizarre. And I thought, what really got me was this one moment. I was standing in the kitchen of this women's shelter, looking out the window, and I was praying. And backtrack a couple months, I had been in the Mandalay Bay, um, on a call. That's what you would call it when someone books you. I was on a call, and I was strangled almost to death by a buyer there. And I had already known a girl that had died in the life of trafficking, who had been strangled to death and thrown out in a hallway. Um, Serial killers target people like
Yeah,
people in prostitution
yeah,
and lots of other people that aren't just serial killers. But really, it's a really dangerous industry. It is not a job like any job that the world would tell you. It's a very dangerous industry. And I can remember that moment, pulling at his hands, and just could barely get out, please. And I was just like, "Blake, Blake," so I could get out. And I remember my legs started to like collapse from under me, and I had this really shaky feeling, and I just thought it was what accompanied death. And I thought, this is it. My baby's not going to have a mama. And suddenly he let go, and I was able to run out of the room. Well, fast forward, I'm in this rehab. I just get delivered from drug addiction. I don't really know what this whole God thing is. I'm like, I don't know what y'all pray so long for. Bless the food, keep it moving. I don't understand.
right.
Like, the whole thing was so weird. And as I was standing there in prayer, I felt that same shaky feeling come over me. And it kind of like started making me cry. I thought, why am I feeling like that right now? It was the first time in my life I heard the audible voice of God, and it wasn't this like, thus saith the Lord from heaven.
Right,
It was this
right.
like
Right.
piercing thought that
Yes.
radically shifted my whole being. And I had this thought, that feeling is the feeling of life, not death. It was me who released his hands from around your neck. I mean, it's been 20 something years almost. I think maybe 18 years clean. So it's been 18 years. I still remember verbatim that moment, because that's what God does, is God pierces the heart of man. And it was that moment I decided to give my life to the Lord. I'm like, all right, well, my life's yours to use as you wish, because wasn't for God, I wouldn't be
Praise,
here. And
praise.
things were still hard. I was still trafficked another 3 years after that. And then finally, the feds raided our home and allowed an eventual avenue for escape. My trafficker got sentenced to 24 months in prison for tax evasion, was all his charge
That was
was.
it. That was
That
it.
And he told me he only got 12 months. I think he did that because he thought he'd be out sooner so that I'd keep my mouth shut. And I did keep my mouth shut for a long time. I was very afraid to come forward until the Lord started stirring in my heart again. He said, how can you sit here and do nothing? How
Right.
can you sit here in
Right.
your nice house with your warm cup of coffee? And that was it. I decided that I'd quit my job and go into full-time ministry and just see what God had for me. And it's been a
Praise,
wild ride, and I'm just so
praise.
blessed. But I would just want to encourage people that, God is with you all the time. And it doesn't matter what situation you're in, what toxic friendship, toxic work environment, you feel hopeless that you're trapped in this dead end job. Like, as big or as little, it doesn't matter. God has a plan for you, and you got to step out in faith. Faith without works is dead. We actually have to like move that
Yeah.
needle forward, quit, go after it, do whatever God is calling you to do. I want people to live with the fearlessness to jump for Jesus, because
Yes.
it's not nothing worse than having a call and wanting to do something for God and not being obedient to that. And
Right.
and so it's scary, I know, believe me, and it's going to take work, but if
Yeah.
he's calling you to do it, he will be there every step of the way. So,
Absolutely. But you're right. There is nothing more miserable than having a call of God on your life and not obeying it. And it's worth it. It's worth it. Like, no matter what situation you're in, you have to know that God promised, I will not abandon you. I will not forsake you. He is there. He is there, and he will provide a way out. He will seek you out. He will find you. Even if you feel like you're the one sheep, he's going to go search for you.
yep.
And that's when you heard his voice and he intervened.
Yeah, he
And look
really
at
did.
I mean, I don't think I don't want to speak for you, But I think you can see so much power in your story that if you could have changed it, great. But knowing that that story has empowered you to change the lives of thousands and thousands of people. Look what
Y
God has done.
I know, it's crazy. I never thought God would use me, I just thought, "I just got to get out of here." I didn't really
Right.
think about the call or, you just thought like, "I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I can't do this one more day."
Right.
And there's no matter every time a door would open, I mean, we were just talking before we got on, we just up and moved our family halfway across the country, with no plan of just we just felt the Lord start to open doors and move us on, and so we were following that, but I just kept living by this kind of mantra from the Lord, which was like, "It can't be worse than what I've been through. If I
Mm,
lose it all today,
yeah.
it can't be worse than what I've been through. I'll start over. I've done it before. I'll do it again. It's okay." And when
Right.
you live by that kind of just faith of like, "You know what? I'm in for whatever. God, I'm in. I'm in. You want me to play shortstop? I'll play shortstop. You want me to sit on the bench? I'll sit on the bench. I'm in." And when you can just live with that kind of contentment, it's so incredible to see what he'll do with just a willing heart and a servant spirit.
So good. So good. Like if you want a life of adventure, just say yes.
Just say yes and buckle up.
And buckle up, baby, because it's going to be the ride of your life. Oh,
It's not
Rebecca.
easy and it's hard, and sometimes
Oh,
you wanna
yeah.
cry yourself to sleep. You're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"What did I do?"
Yeah. But it only gets hard when we're the ones trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
When we're like, when we're just obedient, then it can look hard, but then we step into it, we're like, oh, God's already made a way where there is no way.
Yeah. And I think it's about having that also heart to be teachable because it is,
Mm,
we now have a nonprofit that has a staff of 7. We have 900 students in 400 US cities. We've trained well over 100,000 law enforcement officers, and leadership is hard. Leadership is hard. It's hard to try to make the best decision you can and be prayerful about next steps and budget cuts. And COVID made us all, any leader during COVID had some really tough decisions to make.
mm.
And so leadership isn't easy, but leaning in to try to find ways to grow, like just stay teachable. I don't know how to lead to the next level. This is how far I've ever been. I have no clue. So I'm going to hire a coach. I'm going to get a mentor. I'm going to take a class. You put in the work to be teachable and to grow. It's not going to be easy. But if you're willing, you'll feel the peace, you'll feel the contentment, and things will fall into place. And guess what? You sometimes won't make the right decisions, and you'll be like, "Ah, crap, foot in mouth. That was my
Right,
bad."
right,
And his grace is sufficient to cover you when
right.
you're trying. We all have bad days. Being a Christian doesn't mean you won't have a bad day. You're gonna make bad choices. But if you're just trying your best, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be
Yeah,
okay. Step out in faith, keep moving forward, dust yourself up, get up, keep going. It's gonna be
that's
all right.
right. That's right. The worst you can do is stay where you are.
Yep.
So don't do that. Just take the next step and see what God unfolds because it's going to blow your mind.
Yep. The
Rebecca,
net
you're amazing. You're
thanks.
incredible. Thank you so much. But I know people want to get more of you. So where can they go to get more of you and more information and more resources?
Yeah, RebeccaBender.org is our website. Our Find Your Lane course, 10 Ways to Fight Human Trafficking, is on there. They're short 5-minute videos. So it's just easy to bust through if you like. We also have a fun quiz. Take a personality quiz, see what personality, matches with what type of trafficking you should get into. So we try to make it fun and doable and not this big, daunting, heavy thing. We
Yeah.
want people to get involved. We want people to learn how to fight social justice, and you can find all of our social at the bottom there, whichever one you're into, Instagram, Facebook, it's all at the bottom there.
Fantastic. Rebecca, thank you so much.
Thanks for
Been
having me.
such a blessing. It's just been such a blessing and so much revelation. And thank you for bringing hope. And thanks for saying yes and stepping out to whatever God has for you. Because we know when you do that, you're going to be blessed like crazy.
Amen.
Be strong.